Hi all. I am going to do a demonstration of a clean space exercise in a virtual world. Um, what is a clean space exercise? A clean space exercise is a way of problem solving in a three-dimensional space. So you'll get an idea as we go through the exercise, but basically it's, you identify a problem, you place it in the space, you go to a different place in that space, and you categorize that place in relationship to your problem, and you keep going until you build this space around this problem that you have. And the idea is that by doing this, participating in this, you get new insights into what that problem is. Hopefully you have new perspectives that you can then use to address that problem, learn, better yourself, that sort of thing. So that's what clean space is. Typically, it's done in like a big white room, um, and it has a coach, a facilitator who asks these questions and walks you through the process. It goes through some, like the basic steps is you start, you establish the space, which we'll do, you establish some links between those places in space, and then you finish and you tend to have some sort of action, or you try to reflect on any insights. Now, what we're not going to have today is a coach because I am demonstrating this. So I'm going to be both the participant and the coach. So this is going to be a very bad clean space exercise. But the idea is actually just to look at the mechanics of this and to see what's possible, and hopefully get some people excited about looking at this as a possible, an additional medium that you can use in addition to actual physical spaces. Why am I doing this in VR? One is I'm just an enthusiast in general, but you have some advantages in VR that or maybe even some opportunities in VR that you don't have in real life. And one is that is control of the z-axis. So I've placed some 3D objects here, and I'm going to switch to my grab option, and you can see I can move them around. So the ground is here, and I can certainly place them on the ground, and that's great. But I can put my spaceman here, and I can put my worker guy here. And if that relationship, one being below another, is meaningful, that's great. I don't need to build a mountain in between them unless it's important for the metaphor. But you could start to see that once you can place things in three-dimensional space, you can start to create more accurate relationships between objects, and that is very, very important in clean space. Another bit is perspective. This is both for the participant, so the person experiencing the clean space, and the coach in clean space. So with the Oculus Quest, which is what I'm using right now, I'm able to stream what I'm seeing into a monitor or a phone, which the coach could be in the real world outside of the space I'm working in, talking to me and coaching me through that, and exactly seeing what I'm looking at. And so they'll have some context there. Now, a coach doesn't actually really need all of that. It's really your experience. But the benefit to the coach is actually being able to empathize even more with what you're going through, and allows them to understand more of the benefit of the process to people in the future and to yourself. Could lead to other insights, and it's just interesting as from a coach's standpoint. I find that really interesting, and I think there's lots to learn there, being able to literally see through other people's eyes. The other bit is being able to revisit your perspective. So these sessions, if you want to, like we're streaming now, but they can also be saved. And so as a participant, I can go back and revisit my thoughts in that conversation and see what I was thinking, where I was looking, and I might be able to look at that and then come up with additional new insights from that. Also, because the space is digital, we can save the space and return to it. So you don't have the cost of having to keep a space in a pristine condition to return to, like in another week when you might have another session. You can actually build on a space over great amounts of time with very little cost of physical space. So there's lots of benefits in the z-axis, which is the gravity thing, perspective, being able to see through other people's eyes, and being able to return to this physical space and archive. The other bit is space control. Now, if you're working with a physical space, you only have so many options in the building, right? So we have a room that's this big, we have a room that's this big, this one's white, this one's blue. Color may matter, it may not, but what we can actually do with a participant in VR space is give them space control. So we might start with the problem, which we'll go through the process in a bit, but we might start with the problem, and we might say, great, so write down your problem here, Now, this is the problem. This is the thing that you want to address. What type of space does this best exist in? Now, is it a confined space? If so, we might be able to pull up a small room that they can then work in and then place the other perspectives in. Is it a completely open space like this with like mountains in the background? So it's limitless. So I can go as far away from this as possible, or there's no limits to this. Is it a place without a floor? Is it just in like a zero gravity, no reference point space? Is that where the problem feels like it is? So you can add and enrich the metaphor by being able to very easily control the space around you, which is very difficult to do in real life quickly. And then the last is distance. Now, this isn't distance in VR space, although that is quite true, because I can easily get very far away from it and then come back to it. But it's actually distance in real life. So in VR, I can work in VR with another person that has a headset. And so the coach may actually be in Venezuela. So I'm in New Zealand right now. They might be in Venezuela and they might say, great, so I'm going to put it on. And they could be invisible or they could be seen. That could be up to them. But I could hear them and they could see what I'm doing in the space and ask me questions to help guide the exercise. So these are just some advantages that come off the top of my head that VR can offer CleanSpace. And so without continuing on my diatribe, I'll probably just go through the exercise now. And so the exercise now is basically, so you start with a problem, and that's the start bit, which I left off. And what I've done is I've created these. Typically, you write them down on a piece of paper, and you put them somewhere in the space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down what my problem is. And actually, instead of just writing it down, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it this big, and I'm going to put some icons here to remind me of what I'm talking about. And these are two people with two different jobs, and that's kind of the problem that I want to explore right now is what kind of job do I want to have in the future? So right now, I've taken some time to reconsider my career path. Currently, I've been an agile coach for a long period of time, but I want to get more into product. But at the same time, I'm still really extremely passionate about growing the agile community and seeing coaches get what they need to thrive, of which I have not seen heaps of in my history. And I've seen some of it done really well and some of it not done really well. And so really my question that I'm exploring right now, which I don't expect to actually be able to solve, is what do I want to do for a job? Do I want to remain being an agile coach in the same capacity as I have before? Or do I want to do something different? So that's the problem. The first thing is put it in space. Now, I've sort of constrained my space here. I'm going to shrink this down really quick. I'm going to capture all these things. And I'm going to move this outside of here. So I'm going to choose to use this blocky space here as my space. In fact, I might even mark that just so I have it. All right. So this ring around me represents. Cool, so this is my space. And where do I want to put this? Well, because right now, this is the reason I'm here. I'm going to put it in the center. And I could put it sort of in the middle of this, what I think is the middle of it. But actually, I'm going to put it down low here. And I think the reason I put it down low is because it seems to be weighing on me a lot. And so I'm visualizing it's pulling in things, like it's got its own gravity. It's quite low. It's not quite hitting the bottom, but it's quite low. And so I've added the first one. So that's the thing. It's heavy, it's in the center, and it's pulling things towards it. Um, Now the next one, hold on. Next one. So then what you do is you say, okay, find another spot in the space. Now, what you do is you walk around, you look at it, and you're like, maybe here. And actually, not quite here, like here. I'm just going to pick this spot in space right here. And they say, okay, so what is this spot in space? And what am I doing? So I'm going to be facing away from it. So I'll show my perspective is going this way. And how do I feel? I feel like this is the part of me that kind of wants to escape that question. I'm still being pulled in towards it, but I'm putting some energy to go away from it. And so maybe this represents, in some way, my fear. So I'm going to go into here and switch this. I'm going to grab the spider. I'm not a big fan of spiders. Make it quite large. I'm going to say I've got some fears and some concerns around changing my career. I've been doing it for a while, but at the same time, there are these things that are pulling me away from it. It's actually it's not directly away from it, but it's sort of outside of this gravity loop. Like maybe I'm afraid of this gravity loop that's happening, this gravity pull that's happening, this sink. I'm being pulled towards this decision. Am I even in the right place? And so that's kind of where that spider's at. I say, okay, now pick another space. Okay. Grab you. I'm going to pick this. I'm going to say this is directly at this and going in that direction is this guy. One thing that's been quite difficult in moving to a new country, New Zealand, with no family and having to start over, is not having previously been a landowner or anything in the U.S. is I don't necessarily need a property this big, but I would like to live somewhere, particularly because you start thinking about, oh, well, where do I want to live? I desperately want a dog, and it's really hard to have a dog if you rent. So, one of this, but also a lot of other things are tied up into the decision of what job I pick. So I have all of these wants and these desires. Like I would love to own a place, I'd love to have a dog, potentially want a family in the future. How is this? And you know what? To enforce this or to embellish this idea even more, I'm going to put a link between these two. So these two are linked. I feel like they're very heavily linked, and that's very detached. Okay, so then they would say pick another space. So, okay, pick another space. And so in this space, what's below it? Let's pick another space and let's talk about potentially be below this. So first off, what am I doing? What am I looking at? think this space that's below it is actually looking up towards the thing that I fear. I'm being honest. It's good to be in these sessions. And this is, so while this is being affected, I think, by this gravitational pull, although it's trying to escape, this one is underneath it, and it's not being pulled in, even though I know gravity pulls in all directions. In my model, it just goes like a bowl, kind of like a... So this is slightly underneath that, and it's looking directly at the thing I fear, and it's kind of a question of, I know that maybe it's feeding that fear. So maybe it's a matter of rest and sort of sustainability. And I think maybe my concept of a job, you know, some of these ambitions that I have in my life, as far as property and that sort of thing, and these fears, maybe the thing that is sort of looking at these fears from the outside is, or maybe the thing that's fueling the fears. Let's see if there's anything for fuel. Let's just say yes. Thing that's sort of empowering this is this idea that I don't have an infinite amount of energy, and I, because of that, I kind of fear getting pulled into this thing, and that I feel I'll be drained because, you know, I've been working pretty hard out for the last 6 years, and yeah, I need to be able to recycle and get the energy back to come in to enjoy the work and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the space for now. That's fine. So maybe the last one is let's go outside the space. So how do I feel about looking at, this is Joe and his problem and sort of the relationships between them. How do I feel looking outside the space? Let's see. I need to see it from this perspective. See it from this perspective. What do I think? Okay, I have an idea. I'll go through this. I think I'll put this here is there's probably this is the initial sort of conversation. This is not deep, and this is happening really quickly, but there's probably a lot for me to learn here. This session probably isn't long enough for me to really explore these concepts, but outside looking in is I've got a clear thing taking me away from the problem that I want to address. Maybe I need to pick another place in the space to reinforce why I'm focusing on this in the first place, of which I could do. And now we sort of establish, so now that we've sort of got the space, here's the core problem. What am I going to do next for my job? I have desires here, things that are taking me away from even wanting to address this, and basically that's rest. And then outside, I've got stuff to learn. So now, what are the relationships between all these things? And so what we would do is we would go to each one of these things, and we say job. Now, from your perspective on the job, look at rest, and how does that look there? And then I might add some words and add some other things in this direction, and I can put those in here, and we do that there, and we build up these links from each one of these directions in each one of these sort of places in space, and we would start to fill out this metaphor, and we would start to see how all these things are connected. I'm not going to bore you with that exercise as I coach myself, but hopefully for those of you who are watching, you start to realize what's actually possible in this space. You can notate, you can create emphasis, you can change colors, you can sort of build this out over time to explore these problems in a multitude of ways. And hopefully those points I made before, the z-axis and how it's beneficial to have things in free space, perspective and how that can be quite valuable, being able to return to this space and build on it later, which I may do. Space control in general, like I made the outline here. And then, of course, a distance, being able to do this exercise and coach somebody or be coached by somebody, even though the two of you are in two completely different parts of the world. Hopefully, you're starting to see how that these benefits might be relevant and worth further exploration. I don't think tilt brush is the right tool overall. The reason I'm able to sort of scroll through all these things is because I've spent a fair amount of hours working with it. And so I kind of know how to get my way through and find things and draw things and that sort of thing. I think there's probably a huge opportunity in the future if this is something that powers the bee and the people that really understand CleanSpace well think is worth doing, that you probably need to create a space not unlike this, but that the coach has the ability to facilitate on behalf of the person, so it's quite seamless. The benefit of the CleanSpace in the real world is you're using paper and pen in a room of which we're all very familiar with, and it doesn't take away from the experience and the wonderment. It actually just sort of folds in. So that's probably one of the biggest limitations to using VR, is getting comfortable with the equipment and the environment first. But once that's done, there is so much here to explore and play with, and hopefully add value to people's lives. Anyways, that's me for exploring CleanSpace in VR. This is my first attempt at trying to demonstrate the benefits that I see. All right, thank you very much.